Taking a deep breath, he hoisted his duffel bag back over his shoulder and hurried up the dock, catching up to Ken.
"I saw the new owner up at the office a few minutes ago,"
Ken said when Chris reached him. Both men continued to walk up the dock toward the ramp leading to the parking lot. "He stopped by the boat 30 minutes ago. I already gave him the keys," Chris explained.
"I still can't believe Tad sold the boat."
Ken shook his head and dug his hand into the front pocket of his work pants, searching for his truck keys. Chris shifted the weight of the duffel bag from one shoulder to the other.
"Doesn't surprise me. He hasn't used it for the last year, what with a divorce and all."
Ken pushed through the gate leading from the dock to the parking area.
"Yeah? But now where are you going to live?"
"I'll figure out something." Chris shrugged. "I want to thank you again for taking me to the airport this morning."
"Hey, no problem. You coming back to Dana Point after Christmas?"
"There's no reason to." Chris stopped by Ken's truck and waited for the older man to unlock it. "With Tad selling the boat, no place for me to stay."
"If you want, I could ask around. Someone might be looking to rent out their boat."
Ken climbed into the driver's seat. Chris tossed his duffel bag into the back of the truck and then got into the passenger side of the cab. "Why would I want to rent something?" Chris laughed. "Tad let me crash there for free."
"You got to stay somewhere."
Ken slipped a key into the ignition and turned on the engine. "I suppose, but it was time for me to move on anyway." Chris slammed the door shut and buckled his seatbelt.
"You said you're going to Oregon?"
Ken asked, as he drove the truck out of the parking lot and headed for the highway.
"Yes, flying into Portland, and I plan to rent a car there, staying at a bed and breakfast on the coast, a little town called Frederickport." "Never heard of it. You said you're staying through Christmas?"
Ken glanced briefly at Chris and then looked back down the road.
"Yeah."
Chris leaned back in his seat and looked out the side window.
"Is this some family get-together?"
Ken asked. Chris shook his head. "Nope. I don't have any family in Oregon. At least not that I know of." Both hands on the steering wheel, Ken started to chuckle. Chris glanced over to Ken. "What's so funny?"
"I get it. This is a little romantic holiday getaway. I should have figured it out when you said you were staying at a B&B. My wife has been trying to get me to stay at one of those for years."
Chris shook his head. "No, I'm not meeting anyone. Well, at least no one I know personally."
"You going by yourself?"
Ken frowned.
"What about that cute little gal who was always hanging around the sailboat? The little blonde whose parents own Weekend Warrior?"
"You mean Bridget?" Chris glanced briefly at Ken. Ken nodded.
"Yeah, I think that's her name."
"Bridget is practically jailbait."
"Practically, but I'm sure she's at least 18. And by the way, she was always mooning over you. Damn, I'd love to be your age again."
Chris laughed and shook his head. "Not really interested in schoolgirls, Ken. She's a nice girl, but not my type." Ken narrowed his eyes and glanced over to Chris.
You do like girls, don't you? I mean, well, if you don't, that's okay with me. After all, I have a nephew who prefers, well, you know."
Chris flashed Ken a smile. "I like women, all right. I just prefer one who isn't looking for a meal ticket."
"Guess as long as you remain homeless, you won't have to worry about that,"
Ken said with a laugh. "I guess not." Chris smiled and leaned back in the seat. After a few moments of silence, Ken asked,
"So this trip to Oregon, it's just you, all alone for Christmas?"
"I won't be alone, Ken. I assume there'll be other people staying at Marlow House."
"Marlow House?"
"It's the name of the bed and breakfast."
"Can I ask you something?"
Ken asked. Chris thought the question amusing, considering Ken had practically just asked him if he was gay.
"Sure, ask away." "Whatever gave you the idea to book a room at this bed and breakfast for the holidays?"
I saw a brochure on the place. It looked interesting," Chris lied.
"Well, I can't